Daniel Harper and Lily Grant were ordinary people in an ordinary town, until one winter morning turned everything upside down. What began as a simple missing person case quickly revealed a hidden basement, endless recordings, and a chilling secret no one in Brookdale could have imagined. By the time the truth came to light, it was clear. Daniel Harper was not just a kidnapper, and Lily Grant's ordeal was only the beginning of a nightmare that would haunt the town forever. Brookdale had always been the kind of town where nothing truly shocking ever happened. The streets were lined with neat houses, trimmed lawns, and friendly faces. Children rode their bikes until sunset, and neighbors greeted each other by name. It was the sort of place people moved to when they wanted peace and safety. That illusion shattered on a freezing morning in January when police cars filled Willow Street and yellow tape stretched across Daniel Harper's front yard. Daniel had lived there for 2 quiet years. He worked from home as a graphic designer and rarely caused concern. He paid his bills on time, kept his property clean, and spoke politely when approached. Yet in the weeks before everything unraveled, small details began to feel wrong. Delivery trucks stopped outside his house almost daily, dropping off large boxes he quickly carried inside. The curtains stayed shut at all hours. At night, harsh white light glowed through the basement windows long after the rest of the street had gone dark. Some neighbors mentioned a sharp chemical smell drifting through the cold air, but no one reported it. The situation turned serious when 23-year-old Lily Grant was reported missing. Her family traced her last phone signal to an area only blocks away from Willow Street. When officers knocked on Daniel's door, there was no response. After repeated attempts, they forced entry. Upstairs, everything looked perfectly ordinary. It was what they discovered below the house that would change Brookdale forever. The basement stairs creaked as officers carefully made their way down, their flashlights cutting through the dim air. A strong chemical odor grew heavier with each step. The space below did not look like a typical storage area filled with old boxes and forgotten furniture. Instead, it was organized with unsettling precision. Long tables lined the walls, each covered with cameras, wires, recording devices, and bright industrial lights aimed toward the center of the room. In the middle stood a single metal chair bolted to the floor. The concrete walls were covered with soundproof padding, and thick cables ran across the ceiling into a control panel mounted near the stairs. It felt less like part of a home and more like a hidden laboratory. Investigators noticed labeled containers neatly arranged on shelves, along with stacks of memory cards sorted by date. As they continued searching, one officer spotted scratch marks along the floor near a tall metal cabinet. When the cabinet was pulled aside, it revealed a narrow steel door built directly into the foundation wall. The lock was heavy and reinforced from the outside. After forcing it open, officers found a small, windowless room barely large enough to stand in. Inside, they discovered Lily Grant curled against the wall, weak and dehydrated but alive. The air inside was stale and suffocating. There were cameras mounted in the corners and a small speaker attached near the ceiling. Paramedics rushed Lily to safety while detectives sealed the property. But one terrifying detail stood out. Daniel Harper was nowhere inside the house. After the house was secured, digital forensic teams began examining the equipment collected from the basement. Dozens of memory cards and hard drives were carefully cataloged and transported to the station. What investigators uncovered over the next several days sent a wave of shock through the entire department. Each device contained video files arranged in dated folders. The recordings all followed the same pattern. A person sat restrained in the metal chair under harsh white lights. The camera angle never changed. There were no sudden movements, no visible struggle, just long hours of silent footage. The victims appeared confused at first, then exhausted, then terrified as time passed. Some recordings lasted for hours, others for days. When detectives cross-referenced the faces in the videos with national missing persons databases, a horrifying connection became clear. Several individuals have been reported missing over the last 3 years in neighboring towns and cities. None of those cases have been linked before. Now, they all pointed back to one basement on Willow Street. Even more disturbing were the detailed notes stored in digital files. Each victim had been assigned a number. Their physical reactions, sleep patterns, and emotional breakdowns were documented with clinical accuracy. It read less like a crime and more like data collection. Yet one detail did not fit. The final folder was labeled differently from the rest. It contained no victim, only a blank screen waiting to be recorded. The final folder did not contain a victim, but it did contain a series of documents that unsettled investigators even more than the videos. Inside were typed notes describing what was called Phase 3. Unlike the earlier files, which focused on observation and recording, these documents outlined a shift in purpose. The language suggested escalation. It spoke about pushing limits further, testing endurance beyond previous boundaries, and achieving what was described as complete psychological fracture. Printed charts showed timelines extending far longer than any of the previous recordings. There were references to controlled lighting cycles, temperature changes, and isolation periods designed to disorient the subject completely. Whoever wrote the plan believed they were on the edge of proving something significant. Detectives quickly realized Daniel Harper had no formal training that would explain the scientific structure of these documents. He had no history of studying psychology, neuroscience, or medicine. Yet the terminology used was advanced and precise. A deeper search of Daniel's computer uncovered encrypted communication logs hidden behind layers of security software. The messages were fragmented but clear enough to reveal instructions being given step by step. Someone using anonymous usernames had guided him through equipment setup, recording standards, and data storage procedures. The tone of the messages was authoritative, almost supervisory. Then, 2 weeks before Lily Grant was abducted, the instructions changed. One final message stood out from the rest. Preparation complete. Proceed to final subject. After that, there was silence. While investigators worked to decode the encrypted messages, Lily Grant slowly regained strength in the hospital. Doctors confirmed she had been deprived of proper sleep and food, but she was physically stable. Though she struggled to speak for long periods, she managed to describe key details in writing that helped detectives understand what had happened inside the basement. According to her account, Daniel rarely entered the small room where she was kept. Most of the time, she was alone. Bright lights would switch on without warning and remain on for hours. At other times, complete darkness surrounded her. A small speaker in the corner occasionally produced low mechanical sounds or bursts of static, making it impossible for her to relax. Cameras were always pointed at her from every angle. She wrote that it felt like someone was constantly studying her reactions. What unsettled investigators most was her description of the final 2 days. Lily explained that the lights abruptly shut off and never turned back on. The speaker stopped producing noise. The steady hum of equipment upstairs disappeared. For the first time since her captivity began, there was total silence throughout the house. She never heard footsteps, never heard a door close. It was as if Daniel had vanished in the middle of his own operation. Around the same time, digital analysts uncovered the final encrypted message sent to Daniel's account. It contained only 4 words. Phase 3 begins now. The investigation shifted from Daniel Harper to the possibility that someone else had been directing him from the shadows. Cybercrime experts worked for weeks tracing the encrypted messages found on his computer. The trail was carefully hidden behind layers of anonymous servers, fake accounts, and rerouted connections across multiple countries. Whoever had been communicating with Daniel knew exactly how to avoid detection. Eventually, analysts discovered that several of the messages briefly passed through a server once registered to a private behavioral research company called Northbridge Institute. The company had operated quietly for years before shutting down without explanation nearly a decade earlier. Public records showed it specialized in human stress response studies funded by undisclosed investors. After its closure, most of its lead researchers seemed to disappear from public databases. There were no recent publications, no active profiles, no clear information about where they had gone. Detectives traveled to the Institute's former location, only to find an abandoned building surrounded by rusted fencing and overgrown weeds. The The property had been sold multiple times through shell corporations, making ownership difficult to track. Inside, empty laboratories and stripped offices offered no immediate evidence, but the layout was disturbingly similar to the setup found in Daniel's basement. This discovery changed the direction of the case. It suggested Daniel may not have created the experiments himself. He might have been following a blueprint developed long before he ever moved to Brookdale. As months passed without any confirmed sighting of Daniel Harper, public attention slowly began to fade. Search teams combed through nearby forests, drained ponds, and reviewed traffic footage from highways leading out of Brookdale. Nothing placed him leaving town. His bank accounts remained untouched, and his passport was still inside his bedroom drawer. It was as though he had stepped out of existence. Then, late one afternoon, a group of hikers exploring a wooded area just outside town noticed disturbed soil beneath a fallen tree. Curious, they uncovered a small metal case wrapped tightly in plastic. Inside were several memory cards, a compact camera, and a folded handwritten note with no signature. The memory cards contained a single continuous recording. The footage showed the familiar basement room, but this time Daniel sat in the metal chair at its center. The bright lights that had once been aimed at others were now fixed directly on him. His face looked pale and drained, his eyes heavy as if he had not slept for days. The camera angle was identical to the previous recordings of victims. For nearly 6 hours, Daniel remained in the chair, shifting slightly but never speaking. No one else appeared on screen. Yet the lights adjusted automatically, and equipment hummed around him as if operated remotely. Near the end of the video, the lights abruptly shut off. The camera continued recording complete darkness. Then the file ended. Daniel Harper was never seen again. After the discovery of the metal case in the woods, the investigation entered its final stage. Authorities examined the handwritten note found inside, but it contained no confession and no clear explanation. It simply listed dates, times, and what appeared to be measurements similar to those documented in the earlier basement files. The handwriting matched Daniel's, yet the tone felt detached, almost clinical. It read like data, not regret. Forensic teams confirmed that the video of Daniel in the chair had not been edited. There were no visible signs of another person entering the frame, and no fingerprints other than his were recovered from the equipment. The control system in the basement had been capable of operating automatically through pre-programmed timers. That meant the experiment shown in the final recording could have continued without anyone physically present. Investigators faced two possibilities. Either Daniel had turned the system on himself and remained there willingly, or someone had been controlling it remotely before disappearing without a trace. Despite months of work, no additional evidence surfaced. The encrypted accounts connected to the messages were deleted permanently. The abandoned research facility offered no new leads. With no body and no confirmed suspect beyond Daniel, the case eventually went cold. Brookdale returned to its quiet routines, but the memory of what happened on Willow Street never faded. To this day, one question continues to disturb those who study the case. Was Daniel the criminal or the final subject?